The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, bright red ink screaming across official HOA letterhead, informing me that I'd been fined $300 for an unauthorized commercial vehicle presence in my driveway. I stared at it, confused, until I realized they were talking about the propane delivery truck that had been there for exactly 8 minutes last Thursday. I'm Derek Branson, and I've lived in Sunset Ridge Estates in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 years. It's one of those cookie-cutter suburban developments where every house looks vaguely similar, and the grass has to be exactly 2 inches tall. I'd bought the place after my divorce, thinking it would be a fresh start. The house was nice, the neighbors mostly kept to themselves, and I worked from home as a software developer, so the quiet suited me fine. The HOA had always been a minor annoyance. They'd send notices about trash cans being visible from the street after 7 in the morning, or about my mailbox needing a fresh coat of paint. I'd complied with most of their requests because it was easier than fighting. But a $300 fine for a propane delivery, that was absurd. I'd switched to propane for my outdoor grill and the backup generator I'd installed after the power grid issues last summer. The propane company delivered to my house once every 2 months, filling the tank that sat behind a decorative fence in my backyard. The truck had to pull into my driveway to access the tank. There was literally no other way to do it, unless I wanted the delivery guys to hand carry 200 pounds of propane through my house. I called the HOA office the next morning. A chirpy receptionist named Melissa answered on the third ring. Sunset Ridge HOA, how may I help you? Hi, this is Derek Branson from 847 Sagaro Drive. I received a fine notice yesterday that doesn't make any sense. Oh, let me pull up your account, I heard typing. Yes, Mr. Branson. I see the violation here. Commercial vehicle in driveway on October 17th at approximately 2:15 p.m. It was a propane delivery truck. They were filling my tank. It took less than 10 minutes. I understand, Mr. Branson, but according to our CC and Articus, commercial vehicles are not permitted in driveways except for emergency services. How else am I supposed to get propane delivered? That's not really the HOA's concern. The rules are very clear. I felt my jaw tighten. Can I appeal this? You can request a hearing at the next board meeting. That's November 15th at 6 p.m. in the clubhouse. Would you like me to put you on the agenda? Yes, please. Done. You'll receive a confirmation email within 24 hours. Is there anything else? No, that's it. I hung up, already annoyed. I have to take time out of my evening to go argue with a bunch of retired busybodies about basic home maintenance. But $300 was $300, and the principle of the thing bothered me even more than the money. The confirmation email arrived the next day, along with another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that because the fine hadn't been paid within 72 hours, it was now $350 with an additional $50 late fee. I called the office again. Melissa, it's Derek Branson again. I just got a late fee notice, but I'm appealing the original fine at the board meeting. The appeal doesn't stop the fine from accruing late fees, Mr. Branson. It says so in Section 12.4 of the CC and Articus. That's insane. I'm sorry you feel that way. Will there be anything else? I hung up without answering. This was getting ridiculous. I pulled up the CC and Articus on my computer and started reading through the dense legal language. Sure enough, there it was in Section 7.3. No commercial vehicles, trucks, vans, trailers, boats, recreational vehicles, or similar vehicles shall be parked in driveways or visible from the street except during active emergency service provision. But there was also Section 4.8. Homeowners shall maintain all installed utilities and safety equipment in proper working order. I had a propane system. I needed to maintain it. How was I supposed to do that without deliveries? I spent the next week gathering documentation. I printed out my propane service contract, photos of my tank and fence, and the delivery schedule. I even got a letter from the propane company explaining that driveway access was standard industry practice for residential tank filling. The fine hit $400 by the time November 15th rolled around. The clubhouse was a bland stucco building near the entrance to the development. I arrived at 5:55, carrying a folder with all my documentation. A few other residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs facing a long table at the front of the room. I recognized a couple of them from neighborhood events, but we'd never really talked. The HOA board filed in at exactly 6. There were 5 of them, 2 men in their 60s, 2 women in their 50s, and 1 woman who looked to be in her 40s. I'd met the board president, Patricia Whitmore, once at a community barbecue. She'd spent the entire conversation telling me about proper lawn care techniques and complaining about young people who didn't understand neighborhood standards. She sat in the center seat and called the meeting to order by banging a small gavel on the table. The sound made me think of a judge, which seemed appropriate given the authoritarian vibe. "Welcome to the November meeting of the Sunset Ridge Estates Homeowners Association," Patricia said. Her voice was sharp and nasal, the kind that made you want to disagree with her on principle. "We'll begin with regular business and then move to homeowner concerns." I sat through 20 minutes of the most boring administrative discussion I'd ever witnessed. They talked about landscaping contracts, pool maintenance schedules, and whether to approve beige or tan paint for the fence repairs near the tennis courts. It was like watching paint dry if paint could also make you angry. Finally, Patricia looked at a clipboard. "We have one homeowner appeal tonight. Derek Branson regarding citation number 2020 for 1847. I stood up and walked to a small podium they'd set up facing the board. The other residents watched with mild interest. "Mr. Branson," Patricia said, peering at me over reading glasses. "You're appealing a fine for a commercial vehicle violation. Is that correct?" "Yes." The so-called commercial vehicle was a propane delivery truck that was in my driveway for about 8 minutes while they filled my tank. That doesn't change the fact that it was a commercial vehicle in violation of our CC and RTCS. I opened my folder. I understand the rule exists, but I need propane deliveries to maintain my system. I have a letter here from the delivery company explaining that driveway access is standard practice. I held out the letter, but none of the board members reached for it. "We don't need to see that," Patricia said. "The rule is clear. No commercial vehicles in driveways." "How am I supposed to get propane delivered then?" One of the older men, whose nameplate read Gerald Foster, leaned forward. "Have you considered not using propane?" I stared at him. "I have a propane system installed. It's part of my home utilities." "Perhaps you should have considered HOA regulations before installing it," Patricia said. "The system was here when I bought the house. The previous owner used propane." Patricia shuffled some papers. "I don't see any previous violations for this address." Maybe because having propane delivered is a normal, reasonable thing that shouldn't be a violation in the first place. The woman on the far right, whose nameplate identified her as Karen Hutchinson, pursed her lips. "Mr. Branson, there's no need to be rude. We're simply enforcing the rules that all homeowners agreed to when they purchased property here. Of course her name was Karen. Of course it was." "I'm not trying to be rude," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. I'm trying to understand how I'm supposed to maintain my home without breaking rules that don't make sense for this situation. The rules make perfect sense, Karen said. Commercial vehicles are unsightly and lower property values. If we allow propane trucks, what's next? Moving vans staying overnight, delivery trucks parking all day. A propane delivery takes less than 10 minutes. The amount of time is irrelevant, Patricia said. The rule exists for a reason. Your appeal is denied. The fine stands and it's now at $400. If you'd paid the original $300 when you received the notice, you would have saved yourself money. This is ridiculous. This meeting is adjourned for you, Mr. Branson. Please pay your fine within the next week, or we'll be forced to place a lien on your property. I felt heat rising up my neck. You're going to put a lien on my house because I got propane delivered. We're going to place a lien if you don't pay a legitimately assessed fine for a clear violation of community rules. Good evening. I wanted to argue more, but the rest of the board was already looking at their papers, moving on to the next item on their agenda. I gathered my folder and walked out, my hands shaking with anger. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to calm down. A knock on my window made me jump. It was one of the other residents from the meeting, a guy around my age with sandy hair and a friendly face. I rolled down the window. "Yeah, that was brutal in there," he said. "I'm Mike Santos. I live over on Desert Vista, Derek Branson." "I know," I heard. "Listen, they did something similar to me last year, fined me for having my work van in the driveway overnight. Never mind that I'm a plumber and I need my tools." "What did you do?" "Paid the fine. Wasn't worth the fight. But I'll tell you this, Patricia and Karen are on a power trip. They've driven at least 5 families out of this neighborhood with their nonsense. You should have seen what they did to the Johnsons." "What happened?" "They had a vegetable garden in their backyard. You couldn't even see it from the street. But someone flew a drone over and took pictures, then reported them for having an unauthorized structure because they'd built raised beds. The HOA fined them $2,000. You're kidding." "Nope. The Johnsons ended up selling and moving to Scottsdale. Look, I don't want to keep you, but just be careful. These people are vindictive." Mike walked off to his own car and I sat there processing what he'd said. $2,000 for a garden. A lien on my house for a propane delivery. What kind of neighborhood had I moved into? When I got home, I did something I probably should have done before buying the house. I started researching the HOA. It didn't take long to find horror stories. There was a whole Facebook group called Sunset Ridge HOA Survivors, with over 100 members. People shared stories of ridiculous fines, arbitrary rule enforcement, and board members who seemed to enjoy wielding their tiny amount of power like feudal lords. One post from a woman named Jennifer described getting fined for having her garage door open for longer than 30 minutes. Another from a guy named Robert talked about a $500 fine for parking his car on the street overnight when his wife's car was in the shop. The stories went on and on. I joined the group and posted my own story. Within an hour, I had a dozen comments telling me to pay the fine and avoid future deliveries, to get a lawyer, to sell my house and move. One comment stood out, though. It was from someone named Lisa Chang. "Document everything. If you fight them, they'll escalate, so you need a paper trail. Also, look into Arizona HOA law. There are some protections for homeowners that most people don't know about." I messaged her directly, and she responded within minutes. We ended up talking on the phone for over an hour. Lisa had lived in Sunset Ridge for 5 years before finally moving out last spring. She dealt with Patricia and Karen numerous times and had actually filed a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA regulations. "The thing is," Lisa explained. Most HOAs follow the rules. But Patricia's board thinks they can do whatever they want. They've been sued twice and they settled both times rather than go to court, which means nothing ever changes. What would you do if you were still there? Honestly. I'd fight them, but you have to be strategic about it. If you just refuse to pay, they'll put a lien on your house and eventually they can force a sale. Arizona law allows it. That's insane. It is, but it's legal. However, there are also laws about reasonable accommodation and essential services. Propane delivery could potentially be argued as essential, especially if you use it for heat or cooking. I have a generator that runs on it. Perfect. That's backup power, which could definitely be argued as essential. You need to send the board a certified letter explaining that propane delivery is essential to your home's safety systems and requesting a reasonable accommodation under Arizona law. Will that actually work? Maybe. Maybe not. But it creates a record that you tried to work with them. If they refuse and you end up in court, it shows you were acting in good faith. I thanked Lisa for her help and spent the rest of the evening drafting a letter. I explained about my generator, my propane system, and the necessity of deliveries. I cited Arizona Revised Statute Section 33-1803, which requires HOAs to act reasonably and in good faith. I sent it certified mail the next morning. The response came back within a week. It was another letter from Patricia, this one even more condescending than the previous ones. Dear Mr. Branson, your request for accommodation has been reviewed by the board. We find no basis for an exception to our clearly stated rules regarding commercial vehicles. Your propane delivery is not an essential service as you have other options for home heating and power. The fine now stands at $450. Please remit payment immediately. Other options. It was Arizona in November. I didn't need heating. And my generator was a backup system, sure, but that didn't make it non-essential. During last summer's rolling blackouts, it had kept my refrigerator running and my home office operational. I worked from home. Power was essential. I called Lisa again. They denied it. Of course they did. Okay, next step. You need to decide if you want to actually fight this. If you do, you'll need a lawyer. I can give you the name of the attorney who helped me. He specializes in HOA disputes. How much did that cost you? I paid a $200 consultation fee and never went further because I decided to move instead. But if you're serious about this, he'd probably take it on contingency or for a flat fee. She gave me the name. Daniel Reeves, an attorney with an office in downtown Phoenix. I called and made an appointment for the following Tuesday. Meanwhile, my next propane delivery was scheduled for December 3rd. I was running low, and the weather was getting cooler. Some nights were dropping into the 40s, and while that's not exactly freezing, I liked having heat available. I called the propane company and explained the situation. The dispatcher, a woman named Carol, listened sympathetically. We've had this happen before with different HOAs, she said. Usually we just try to schedule deliveries when there are fewer people around to notice. The HOA president literally drives around looking for violations. I've seen her. She has a clipboard. Wow. Okay, well, we can try to be really fast. Our guys can do a fill in about 6 minutes if there are no complications. The fine is already at $450. If I get another violation, I'm sure it'll be even worse. What do you want to do? You need propane. Let me talk to my lawyer and I'll call you back. I met with Daniel Reeves on Tuesday morning. His office was in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Phoenix skyline. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, with an easy smile and a confident demeanor. So you've angered the Sunset Ridge HOA, he said after I explained the situation. You're not the first. I've dealt with Patricia Whitmore before. Really, about 3 years ago. Different client, different issue, but same attitude. She thinks the HOA board has unlimited power. What she doesn't understand is that Arizona law actually provides significant homeowner protections, and HOAs can be held liable for acting unreasonably. He pulled up something on his computer. The key statute here is ARS 33-1803. It requires HOAs to act reasonably and in good faith. Fining you for an essential service delivery is arguably unreasonable. That's what I thought. The problem is that fighting this could cost you more than just paying the fine. HOA litigation can drag on. They have insurance that covers legal fees, so they don't care how long it takes. You'd be paying out of pocket. So I should just pay? Not necessarily. There's another option. We make this public and embarrassing for them. HOA boards hate bad publicity. It makes it harder to attract buyers to the neighborhood. How would we do that? Well, for starters, I'd send them a letter on law firm letterhead. That usually gets their attention. We lay out the legal problems with their position and suggest they rescind the fine. If they refuse, we can file a complaint with the Department of Real Estate and possibly talk to some local media. There are a couple reporters in Phoenix who love HOA horror stories. What would that cost me? The letter, $500. If it works, you're only out $200 more than the fine and you've made your point. If it doesn't work and you want to escalate, we can talk about next steps. I thought about it for a minute. $500 was a lot of money, but the principle of the thing was eating at me. I didn't want to live in a neighborhood where I couldn't perform basic home maintenance without being harassed. Do it, I said. Daniel drafted the letter that afternoon. I reviewed it before he sent it. The language was formal but pointed, making it clear that the HOA's position was legally questionable and that I was prepared to pursue all available remedies, including litigation, regulatory complaints, and media attention. The last part is key, Daniel explained. HOA boards can usually be shamed into backing down if they think the neighborhood will get negative press. Property values are everything to these people. The letter went out on Wednesday. My propane delivery was scheduled for the following Tuesday, December 3rd. I decided not to cancel it. If the HOA backed down, great. If not, I deal with another fine and keep fighting. Friday afternoon, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Derek Branson? Yes. This is Patricia Whitmore from the Sunset Ridge HOA board. I received a letter from your attorney. Okay. I want you to know that threatening the HOA with legal action is completely inappropriate. We are simply enforcing the rules that all homeowners agreed to. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm pointing out that your rules are being applied unreasonably. There's nothing unreasonable about enforcing our CC and RTCS. There is when you're fining me for maintaining essential home systems. Mr. Branson, I'm calling as a courtesy to let you know that if you pursue legal action, the HOA will vigorously defend itself. We have insurance and resources, and we will not be bullied. I'm not bullying anyone. I'm trying to get propane delivered to my house. Then pay your fine and find a different way to do it. There is no different way. The truck has to access my driveway. That's your problem, not the HOA's. She hung up. I immediately called Daniel and told him about the conversation. Perfect, he said. That's harassment. She shouldn't be calling you directly, especially not to threaten you. Can you send me a written summary of what she said while it's fresh in your mind? I typed up everything I could remember and emailed it to him. He responded that he'd be sending a follow-up letter instructing the HOA to cease all direct contact with me and to communicate only through him. By this point, I was fully committed to the fight. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about not letting these people push me around. Tuesday morning arrived cold and sunny. My propane delivery was scheduled for 1 p.m. That morning, I had an idea. It was petty. It was probably a little bit vindictive, but it felt right. I called Carol at the propane company. "Hey, this is Derek Branson. I need to reschedule my delivery today." "Oh no, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I just need to change the time. What's your latest delivery slot? We can go until about 7 p.m. if needed." "Can you do 6? Let me check." I heard typing. "Yeah, we can do 6 p.m. Any particular reason for the change?" "Let's just say I want to make sure certain people see the delivery happening." Carol laughed. "Got it. We'll see you at 6. I spent the rest of the day working from home, but I couldn't concentrate. At 5:30, I walked over to the clubhouse. Cars were already arriving for the 6 p.m. board meeting. I recognized Patricia's silver Lexus and Karen's white Mercedes. The other board members pulled in over the next few minutes. At 5:55, I saw the propane truck turn into the neighborhood. It was a big white truck with Arizona Propane Services written in blue letters on the side. I walked back to my house, which was 3 houses down from the clubhouse, and met the delivery driver in my driveway. "Hey, I'm Derek. Thanks for coming." The driver, a stocky guy in his 50s named Joe, grinned. "Carol told me about your HOA situation. Happy to help." "I really appreciate it." Joe and his partner, a younger guy named Marcus, got to work. The truck's engine was loud, a diesel rumble that echoed through the quiet evening. They pulled the hose around to my backyard and started the pump. The mechanical whine was even louder than the engine. I stood in my driveway, watching the clubhouse. Through the windows, I could see the board meeting had started. Patricia was at her usual center seat, gesturing as she talked. Then I saw her stop mid-sentence. Her head turned toward my house. Through the windows, I saw her stand up and point. Joe noticed too. "Is that the HOA president?" "Yep, she looks mad." "She's about to be madder." Patricia stormed out of the clubhouse, marching down the sidewalk toward my house. Karen followed behind her along with 2 of the other board members. I stayed in my driveway, arms crossed, waiting. "What do you think you're doing?" Patricia demanded as she reached the edge of my property. "Getting a propane delivery." During our board meeting. "This is deliberate harassment. It's 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. That's when my delivery was scheduled. I wasn't aware I needed to coordinate my home maintenance around your meetings." Karen stepped forward. "You're doing this on purpose." "This is completely inappropriate." "What's inappropriate is fining me for maintaining my home." The pump shut off, the sudden quiet almost jarring. Joe and Marcus efficiently rewound the hose and closed the access panel on my tank. Marcus gave me a thumbs up. "All set, Mr. Branson. See you in February." "Thanks, guys." The truck pulled out of my driveway, engine rumbling past the clubhouse. Several residents had come outside to see what the commotion was about. I saw Mike Santos standing on his front porch, grinning. Patricia's face was red. "You'll be getting another fine for this. For getting propane delivered. I'll look forward to appealing it, through my attorney." "You think having a lawyer makes you special? The HOA has lawyers too." "Then I guess we'll see what happens." I turned and walked into my house, closing the door behind me. Through the window, I watched Patricia and Karen argue on the sidewalk for a minute before stomping back to the clubhouse. The other residents dispersed, and the evening returned to normal. I felt pretty good about myself. It was petty, sure, but there was something satisfying about the timing. They wanted to make my life difficult over something stupid. I could be difficult right back. The next morning, I woke up to find my car had been towed. I walked outside in my pajamas to discover my driveway empty except for an oil stain where my Honda had been parked. I called the non-emergency police line to report a stolen vehicle. The dispatcher told me to check with local tow companies first, as it might have been towed for a violation. I called 3 companies before finding the one that had it. "Yeah, we got a Honda Accord here registered to Derek Branson," the guy on the phone said. "Towed from Sunset Ridge Estates last night around 11 p.m. On whose authority? HOA request. You'll need to contact them about getting it released. How much to get my car back? $350 for the tow, plus $100 a day storage. You're at $450 right now." I hung up and immediately called Daniel. They towed my car. What? On what grounds? I have no idea. I was parked in my own driveway. That's illegal. An HOA can't just tow a car from private property without cause. Did you get any notice? Nothing. Okay, I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, don't pay the tow company. We're going to get them to release it and bill the HOA. 2 hours later, Daniel called back. I spoke with the towing company. They said they got a call from someone claiming to be the HOA president, saying your vehicle was abandoned and needed to be towed. They have no written authorization. So they just towed my car based on a phone call. Apparently, which is a problem for them. I've informed them they could be liable for wrongful towing, and they've agreed to release your vehicle at no charge. You can pick it up anytime. What about the HOA? We're filing a complaint with the Department of Real Estate today. This crossed a line from petty harassment into actual damages. You couldn't use your car for half a day because of their illegal actions. I picked up my car that afternoon. The tow yard guy looked embarrassed when I arrived. "Sorry about this, man. We should have gotten written authorization." Your lawyer made that very clear. Not your fault. Well, partly your fault, but I get it. The complaint to the Department of Real Estate went out that same day. Daniel also sent another letter to the HOA, this one much more aggressive. He laid out the pattern of harassment, the illegal towing, and the ongoing fines for essential services. He demanded that all fines be rescinded and that the HOA cease any retaliatory actions. The following week was quiet. I didn't hear from the HOA, and no new fines appeared. I started to wonder if maybe the complaint had scared them into backing down. Then I got a notice in the mail informing me that my water would be shut off for non-payment of HOA dues. According to the letter, I owed $1,200 in back dues, fines, and late fees. If I didn't pay within 5 days, the HOA would instruct the utility company to terminate my water service. I hadn't received any bills for $1,200. I called the HOA office and got Melissa again. "Hi, I received a shut-off notice, but I'm not behind on anything." "Let me check your account, Mr. Branson." Typing sounds. "It shows here that you owe $450 in fines, $300 in legal fees the HOA incurred because of your attorney's letters, $200 in additional late fees, and your quarterly dues of $250 are also past due. I haven't gotten a single bill for any of this except the original fine. All notices were sent to your address on file. I live at 847 Sagaro Drive. That's my address on file, right? Let me check." More typing. "Oh, it looks like your address was updated to 847 Sagaro Circle." That's not my address. I've never lived on Sagaro Circle. That doesn't even exist in this neighborhood. I'm not sure how that happened, but I can update it now. So you've been sending my bills to a fake address, and now you're threatening to shut off my water. The bills were sent to the address on file. It's your responsibility to keep your information current. I didn't change my address. Someone in your office did. "I'm sorry, Mr. Branson, but the bills were sent according to our records. The balance is still due." I hung up and called Daniel. "They're escalating." I explained the water shut-off threat and the mysterious address change. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "This is getting into criminal territory," he said finally. "Falsifying records to manufacture fees is fraud. Threatening to shut off your water over manufactured debt is extortion. I think we need to involve the police." "Really?" "Yeah. This has gone beyond a civil dispute. I'm going to contact the Phoenix Police Department and see about filing a report. You should also document everything. Take photos of your mail, save all the letters, record dates, and times of everything that's happened." I spent that evening organizing my documentation. I had copies of every letter, every fine notice, the towing incident, and now the water shut-off threat. When I laid it all out, the pattern was clear. The HOA wasn't just being petty. They were actively trying to force me out of my house through escalating harassment. Daniel called the next morning. "I spoke with a detective at Phoenix PD. They're interested in the case. Can you come down to the station this afternoon to give a statement?" "Absolutely." The police station was busy, people coming and going constantly. I met with Detective Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes as I explained everything that had happened. "And you have documentation of all this?" she asked. "Everything. Dates, times, letters, photos." "Good. I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Branson. HOA disputes are usually civil matters and we don't get involved. But what you're describing sounds like harassment, possibly fraud, and the towing incident could be theft. I want to look into this further. What do I do about the water shut off?" "Don't pay them anything. If they actually shut off your water, call me immediately." She handed me her card. "In the meantime, I'm going to request some records from the HOA and the towing company." I left the station feeling like maybe things were finally moving in the right direction. For the first time since this whole mess started, I had someone with actual authority taking my side. The 5-day deadline came and went. My water stayed on. I didn't get any more threatening letters. Detective Martinez called me a week later. "I've been going through the HOA's records," she said. "Your address change was made by someone in the HOA office 3 weeks ago. There's a log entry showing it was changed by Patricia Whitmore. The board president changed my address to a fake location so I wouldn't get bills, then tried to shut off my water for non-payment. That's what it looks like. I've also been talking to other residents. You're not the only one who's had problems. There's a pattern here of retaliation against anyone who challenges the board. What happens now? I'm building a case. It takes time, but I think we have enough for charges. Fraud at minimum, possibly extortion. I'll keep you updated." December turned into January. The detective's investigation continued. I kept my head down, paid my actual HOA dues, and avoided any contact with the board. My lawyer sent regular letters documenting that I was in compliance with all legitimate rules and that the outstanding fines were disputed. Then, on a cold Thursday morning in mid-January, I saw police cars outside the clubhouse. 3 marked units and 2 unmarked. I walked over, joining a small crowd of neighbors who'd also come to see what was happening. Patricia Whitmore was led out of the clubhouse in handcuffs. Karen Hutchinson followed a few minutes later, also cuffed. Detective Martinez stood near one of the cars, talking to another officer. Mike Santos appeared next to me. "Holy cow, did you have something to do with this?" "Maybe. I heard they were stealing money from the HOA accounts too." "Like, a lot of money?" That was news to me. I stayed and watched as the police spent the next hour carrying boxes of documents out of the clubhouse and loading them into a van. Detective Martinez eventually noticed me and walked over. "Mr. Branson, Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Once we started digging, we found a lot more than HOA harassment. Like what? Can't discuss an ongoing investigation, but let's just say your complaint opened up a much bigger case. The news hit the local media that evening. Patricia Whitmore and Karen Hutchinson had been arrested for fraud and embezzlement. According to the reports, they'd been systematically overcharging homeowners, creating fake violations, and pocketing the fine money. The total amount was estimated at over $300,000 over a 5-year period. My phone started ringing. Other residents wanted to know what I knew. Reporters wanted comments, and Daniel called to congratulate me. "You just helped take down one of the most corrupt HOA boards in Phoenix," he said. "This is going to be a big case. I just wanted to get propane delivered." Well, you can definitely get propane delivered now. The fallout continued for weeks. The Arizona Department of Real Estate launched its own investigation. A forensic accountant was brought in to examine the HOA's books. More charges were filed as the scope of the fraud became clear. Patricia and Karen both made bail, but they were facing serious prison time. The rest of the board resigned. An emergency meeting was held to elect an interim board, and I actually went to it. The clubhouse was packed. Angry homeowners demanded answers about where their money had gone. Some people had been paying inflated fines for years. Others had been charged for violations that never actually happened. Mike Santos was elected interim president. His first act was to suspend all outstanding fines pending review. "We need to figure out which violations were legitimate and which were bogus," he announced. "If anyone has documentation of questionable fines or harassment, please bring it to the HOA office. We're starting fresh." I submitted my documentation the next day. Within a week, all my fines were rescinded. The HOA sent me a formal apology and a check for $500 to cover my legal fees. It didn't cover all of Daniel's charges, but it was something. The criminal case moved through the system slowly. Patricia and Karen hired expensive lawyers who tried to argue that HOA disputes were civil matters and that the charges should be dismissed. The prosecution countered with evidence of systematic fraud, falsified records, and embezzlement. In March, Karen took a plea deal. She agreed to testify against Patricia in exchange for a reduced sentence. The details that came out during her testimony were shocking. Patricia had been running the scheme for years, long before Karen joined the board. She'd target homeowners who pushed back against violations, escalate fines, and force them to either pay or move. The money went into a separate account that only Patricia controlled. Karen's testimony also revealed that the address change in my account wasn't accidental. Patricia had deliberately changed it to manufacture a reason to shut off my water and force me out. She'd done the same thing to at least 6 other homeowners over the years. Patricia went to trial in May. I was called as a witness and spent 4 hours on the stand describing everything that had happened. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a difficult homeowner who refused to follow rules, but the prosecution had too much evidence. The falsified records, the illegal towing, the address changes, the diverted funds, it was overwhelming. The jury convicted Patricia on 12 counts including fraud, embezzlement, and extortion. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Karen got 3 years for her role in the scheme. By summer, Sunset Ridge Estates had settled into a new normal. Mike Santos and the new board rewrote the CC and Articus to be more reasonable. The commercial vehicle ban was modified to allow deliveries and service vehicles. Several other ridiculous rules were eliminated entirely. Property values actually went up once word got out that the corrupt board was gone. People wanted to live in a neighborhood with reasonable rules and honest management. I got my propane delivered without incident every 2 months. The truck pulled into my driveway, filled my tank, and left. Nobody fined me. Nobody called to harass me. It was boring and normal, exactly as it should be. One evening in July, I was grilling steaks on my propane grill when Mike Santos walked over. "Hey, Derek, got a minute?" "Sure, want a beer?" "Always." I grabbed 2 bottles from inside and we sat on my back patio, watching the sun set over the desert. "I wanted to thank you," Mike said. "If you hadn't fought back against Patricia, we might never have found out about the fraud. She'd probably still be stealing from everyone." "I just wanted propane delivered." "I know, but you stood up to her when most people just paid and moved on. That took guts. Or stupidity." Mike laughed. "Maybe both. But seriously, the neighborhood is better now. People actually like living here again." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, drinking our beers and watching the sky turn orange and purple. "You know," I said eventually, "when I moved here, I thought an HOA would be a minor annoyance at worst. I never imagined it would turn into a criminal investigation. Nobody ever does. That's how people like Patricia get away with it for so long. They count on homeowners being too tired or too busy to fight back." "Well, I'm glad it's over." "Me too. Hey, we're having a neighborhood barbecue next month. You should come. Bring your propane grill," I laughed. "I'll be there." Mike left, and I finished grilling my steaks. As I ate dinner on my patio, I thought about how strange the past several months had been. All I'd wanted was to live quietly in my house, work from home, and not bother anyone. Instead, I'd ended up taking down a corrupt HOA board and sending 2 people to prison. But the neighborhood was better for it. Rules were reasonable. The new board actually listened to homeowners. People weren't afraid of arbitrary fines anymore. My propane tank was full. My generator worked perfectly, and my house was my own. That's all I'd wanted in the first place. The next February, when my propane delivery was scheduled, I happened to check the calendar and noticed it fell on the same day as the monthly HOA board meeting. I called Carol at the propane company. "Hey, this might sound weird, but can we schedule my delivery for exactly 6 p.m.? Carol laughed. "You want to make a point?" "Actually, no. I want to show that it's not a big deal. The board meeting is at 6, and I want them to see that a propane truck in a driveway for 10 minutes doesn't hurt anyone." "That's actually kind of beautiful. We'll be there at 6. The delivery went perfectly. The truck pulled in, filled my tank, and left. Through the clubhouse windows, I could see the board meeting continuing without interruption. Nobody stormed out. Nobody filed a complaint. It was just a normal delivery in a normal neighborhood. Mike called me afterward. "I saw your delivery truck. Nice timing. Just getting propane." "Sure you were." I mentioned it during the meeting, actually. Pointed out how smooth and quick it was. One of the new board members said we should add a note in the newsletter reminding people that service vehicles are allowed and homeowners shouldn't worry about deliveries. That would be good. "It's done. Goes out next week." I thanked him and hung up, feeling satisfied. The newsletter came out the following Wednesday. Right there on page 2 was a section titled Service Vehicle Reminder, explaining that homeowners were welcome to schedule deliveries and service calls without fear of violations, as long as the vehicles weren't left parked for extended periods. It was everything I'd been asking for from the beginning. All it had taken was exposing a criminal conspiracy and sending 2 people to prison. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just paid that first $300 fine. I'd have saved myself months of stress, legal fees, and hassle. But I also wouldn't have uncovered the fraud that had been going on for years. Dozens of families had been overcharged and harassed. Some had even been forced to sell their homes and move. By standing up for myself over something as simple as a propane delivery, I'd accidentally done something good for the whole community. The criminal restitution process took over a year. The forensic accountant identified every improper fine and fee that Patricia and Karen had charged. Homeowners received checks refunding money they'd paid over the years. I got back the original $300 fine, plus all the late fees and bogus charges. The total came to over $800. More importantly, the neighborhood felt different. People were friendlier. There were more community events. The pool and clubhouse actually got used for social gatherings instead of just board meetings and violation hearings. I even joined the HOA board eventually. Mike convinced me to run for a seat, arguing that the neighborhood needed people who understood how important it was to balance rules with reasonableness. "You fought the system and won," he said. "Now help us make the system better." I won the election easily. My platform was simple: enforce rules fairly, listen to homeowners, and never forget that we were all neighbors first. At my first board meeting as a member, we reviewed a request from a homeowner who wanted to install solar panels. The old board would have denied it for aesthetic reasons. We approved it with simple guidelines about placement and appearance. It felt good to be part of the solution, instead of fighting against the problem. My propane deliveries continued every 2 months like clockwork. Sometimes neighbors would be outside when the truck arrived, and they'd wave or stop to chat. The truck became a normal sight in the neighborhood, just another service vehicle doing its job. One delivery driver, a new guy named Tom, told me he'd heard about the Sunset Ridge situation. "You're kind of famous at the depot," he said. "The guy who took down an HOA over propane." That's not exactly what happened. Close enough. Either way, we all appreciate it. Makes our job easier when HOAs aren't constantly complaining about us. I never set out to be famous, even in the small world of propane delivery drivers. I just wanted to maintain my house without being harassed. But I'd learned an important lesson through the whole experience. Standing up for yourself matters, even when the fight seems petty or small. That first $300 fine had been wrong. Paying it would have been easier, but it would have validated an unreasonable rule and given Patricia more power to harass other people. Fighting it had been hard and expensive and stressful, but it had exposed corruption and made things better for everyone. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. Sometimes you have to schedule a propane delivery during an HOA meeting just to make a point. And sometimes, if you're lucky, standing up for yourself helps other people too. 3 years after that first fine, I was still living in my house in Sunset Ridge Estates. The neighborhood was thriving. Property values had recovered from the scandal and were actually higher than before. The HOA ran smoothly under reasonable leadership. Rules were enforced fairly and with common sense. And every 2 months, like clockwork, a big white truck with Arizona Propane Services written on the side pulled into my driveway, filled my tank, and drove away without anyone caring at all. That's all I'd ever wanted. It had just taken exposing fraud, sending 2 people to prison, and completely reforming an HOA to get there. But hey, at least my generator worked.